In today's episode, we'll discuss what some might consider the juicy stuff: mysticism, sorcery, magic, using names to affect supernatural things. So, obviously, we're not going to be giving practical instructions. We're going to be discussing these things conceptually, but it's interesting nonetheless, and it's important to know. So, Section 3, Chapter 2. Be'inyan ha'pu'ula b'shemus u'v'kishuf, regarding using names, divine names, and sorcery. Number 1. Kvar be'anu b'chalokim shekadmu, shetchilas kol ha'nivroim hi klal koiches nivdalim mesudorim b'seder chochma b'machlokes yiduos. This number 1 over here is going to be a general recap of a lot of concepts that we've covered throughout earlier chapters of the book. So we've already explained in depth that the beginning of any creation originates in the primordial forces up in the heavens, nivdalim mesudarim b'seder chachma b'machlokes yiduos, that are clearly arranged up in the supernal realms. Umehem mishtalshalim b'hadroga hagashmiyim leminehem, and from there they channel one stage to the next, down levels until it reaches into the physical world.
Sounds familiar.
Right, it should. Od be'arnu, we also explained. Inyan koiches hara, the concept of evil forces. Shemehem mishtalshalim haros kulam bagashmiyim, that from those root forces of conceptual evil in the heavens, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this episode, that from there, that generates what we perceive as evil here in this world. Od be'arnu, we've also explained, she'ikar amitas hamatzius hanivrahu masha b'sharashim hanivdalim. The main element, the essence of anything that exists, is not here, contrary to what we might assume, because our perception is limited to the physical world. That is the source of where we interact with things, and so therefore we tend to relate to the physical world as real and the essence of something. And the fact that there might be some sort of spiritual source to it is theoretical, and you might have to believe in it. But the truth is, it's the opposite, that the essence of reality is in the spiritual world, and what manifests here in the physical world is nothing more than a projection.
We're only here because God believes in us.
That's a good line. Umasha b'geshamim hu hemshech levad mimasha nishtarish v'nis yasid sham. And anything that exists here in the physical world is only a projection of what has been rooted and founded up in the spiritual world. V'ulam, furthermore, sham nistar v'nispashit masha hoyoroi lehispashit lefi amitas hamatzios hanimtsoim v'inyanim. From there, from that spiritual realm, it extends and spreads forth, and whatever essence, whatever's encoded in that spiritual reality, then manifests here, masharoi lios b'sharashim, masharoi lios b'anofim, things that are appropriate to be rooted in the spiritual world, and things that are appropriate to show up in this world, whatever Hashem decides. And Hashem is what generates the power of this chain of energy, originating in the spiritual world, drawing forth through this chain, Vihitika in Yanamit Mitsura Latsura, and Hashem, so to speak, prints a reality, a version of reality on each level, one stage to the next, until it's all tied down into the physical world down here. So therefore, down here in the physical world, you can trace anything back up that chain to the original spiritual forces that generated all of it. And everything that exists on all of those levels remains at its station, at its level, defined in its own way, as the Creator has instilled in its nature. And it does not change. You cannot transcend one level of reality to the next. Things exist where they are, and they stay there. And these roots exert influence of energy onto their branches, so to speak. Kefi ha'ishtalshelus, all according to that chain of energy that has been established for them. Mibli sheyotzi migvulam hativi klal. And all of this is not supernatural. This is exactly natural. This is the way Hashem intended the world to work. So all of that should not be new information. That's just a recap of things that we've done before. Number 2, the Omnam. However, Gazra Chachma Elyona, Sheiyah Oid Lakoiches HaPoilim Begashmiyim Mitzius Pu'ula Shaloika Seder HaShtalshelus. Hashem also decreed that there be a nature embedded in these forces that affect the physical world, that they have the ability to affect the physical world in a way that is not, so to speak, normal. Dahainu sheyif'alu hem atzmam begashmius pu'ulos misyachzos lechukam v'loy lechuk hagashmius. Meaning, these forces can affect the physical world according to their own laws, the laws of these forces, and not according to the laws which are appropriate for that physical thing. V'hem pu'ulos yishtanu bam hagashmiyim mitivim hatamidi. And therefore, because it is, so to speak, unnatural for these physical things, when these forces do act on physicality, it will change the laws of nature. Not permanently, but it will change the way physicality will operate beyond its normal functions.
Help me understand this, because we have a chain of events that comes down from the spiritual plane that then yields results basically in the physical plane.
Yes.
So what is this saying that's different from that? It sounds like it's saying there's something outside of that chain, but it's in the spiritual realm.
It's not outside of the chain. It's part of the chain. It's just that when you get to the lowest level, right before the physical world, whatever acts on the physical world to make things happen. When I pick up a cup, my hand moves, it grasps the cup, it creates friction, it pushes the cup up. All of these things operate according to the laws of nature, and they seem to be all physical, but in truth, as we've just explained, these really all are rooted in spiritual laws,
right,
that just manifest and project into physicality. So that lower level spirituality, which directly affects the physical world, they also have properties that if you use them properly, if you know how to use them and access them, they can also affect the physical world in a non-standard way.
I see, okay.
V'hine, nitan la'adam yecholos sheyishtamish min hanimtzayis al derech hazeh. Man was given the ability to use these forces in that way. Kamo shenitan lo yecholos lehishhtamish mehem al derech hativi, uva'isa inyan atzmo shenosan lo yehtishtamish bativi. Just like man has the ability to operate within the physical world, like we said, pick up a cup, and operate within the laws of nature, man was also given the ability to operate these spiritual forces that act on nature in a non-standard way. Now let's explain a little bit more what that means. Now, just like when I'm operating within the physical world, even though I do have the ability to act on the physical world, it's not unlimited according to my own desire. I can't pick up a 3,000-pound object just because I want to, and I can't teleport things with my mind. There are rules that govern how I'm able to interact with the physical world based on the rules of the physical world itself. And he gives some examples here. The physical world can only be used in very specific ways according to their laws. You can't cut something without a knife or something sharp. You can't ascend without a ladder or steps. And you can't depress something that isn't soft. The same is true in the spiritual world. There are laws for how I can interact with it.
So it's talking about just if you leave the physical manipulation of matter and go into this new type that he's talking about, you're just jumping from one set of rules to another.
Yes. What he's really getting at here is that although it's possible to supersede the laws of physical nature, those are also in very specific ways, and those have laws as well.
Mm-hmm. This is not the path to infinite power.
Exactly. If you have the ability to perform supernatural acts by hacking the system, diving into the code and changing it before it gets to the physical world, it's not just an access to unlimited magic. There are specific ways you can redirect energies. And all of it is according to what Hashem decreed would be appropriate. Because, of course, this is not exploiting a flaw in the system. There are no flaws in the system that Hashem made. It's all perfect. And therefore, if the ability to access these things is here, it was intended to be here by Hashem for very specific reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3. A further principle that we're going to discuss. We've also already explained the fact that man is a fusion of these two entities, these two opposite entities, the body and the soul. The very pure spiritual entity called the neshama is nikshara bechukim shenikshara. It's tied into the body according to the laws that it's tied to, according to the way Hashem decreed that it should be tied into the body. And it turns out that now man is very confined in his state of physicality, his bodily state, according to the laws of his body and the rules of how physicality work. And the neshama, the spiritual entity, which should be immensely powerful, is tied with ropes to the body. It cannot escape. However, Hashem wanted Hashem wanted man to be able to, at least to some degree, to some small degree, open up that ability just a little bit, and to detach very slightly from those bodily chains and give more access to the neshama. And man will reach a state which is less physical and more spiritual. And as a result of that, he will be able to grasp things, understand truths that are only accessible on that higher spiritual level and could not be fathomed while the soul is fully attached to the body. The soul is concealed from these things in its state of being attached to the body. And with this line he explains why Hashem wanted this. There could be situations where a person is more capable of bringing the world to its ultimate perfection, which of course is the goal of creation in the first place. It could be that certain individuals will have a reason to override physicality to a certain degree, to reach higher levels of spirituality and detach from their body a little bit more, and manipulate things on a more spiritual level in order to accomplish the goal.
That was going to be my question, was, is this portion talking about the actual venturing outside of the physicality as far as, manipulating the physical world? It sounds like it's just talking about elevating and identifying more with your soul. It didn't sound like he mentioned anything about what we're talking about is, it sounds like magic.
Right. He did. I'm not sure exactly what you meant, but it sounds like it's something in between those two options that you gave. He is talking about an elevation, but it's not just that he is feeling more spiritual or identifying more with his soul. There is something that's happening that is there's a metaphysical change in his makeup where he has more access to spirituality because his soul has become a little bit more detached from the body, allowing him to accomplish things that would be otherwise impossible. So that would give him access to quote-unquote magic, which is not a great word. We're going to explain a little bit more what he's really doing.
Right. I'm still working through some of the vocabulary for this stuff. So this enlightened perspective, it's not just an enlightened perspective that makes him better able to perform our mission, which is effectively to fix the broken world. It's more that he's actually going to be able to do things that he could not otherwise do.
Correct. There's a fundamental change in his makeup.
Okay.
Number 4. Vehine, heichina achachme elyono, shiyamatze bitul legvulim migvulei hateva hachaymer v'ha'olam hazeh. Hashem prepared a way that there will be an ability to nullify some of the laws of nature, to bring down the barriers that define the physical world. Specifically, the kinds of barriers that lock a person into the world of physicality and block us off from higher elements of spirituality, for example, interacting with spiritual entities like angels or others. The yutar ha'adam mikishurehem v'yitzyatsiv al matziv mu'ulam matzave hagashmi ad shiyitun lekesher ve'inan im haruchanim. And man is then untied from the knot that is tethering him to this world. V'yitzyatsiv al matziv mu'ulam matzave hagashmi, and he becomes established on a higher level in a state of more spirituality, to the point where he can develop real connections with spiritual entities. Even while he's still here in this very obscure body, the physical body. However, not all of the laws of nature can be nullified. Just some of them. Only the ones that would be appropriate for this intention that's guiding the world toward its perfection, like we have mentioned back in section 1. And also this method of removing barriers to the spiritual world, that also, of course, has many conditions that are very measured. It's all precise. Number 5. Now, Hashem created in the world means for man to be able to accomplish this. That using these means, man is able to accomplish this goal of being able to break down the barriers between physicality and spirituality. If he wants and he knows how to use them properly. And we're talking about nullifying these boundaries that define the world. And he can establish himself on that level, breaking past his normal barriers, like we've mentioned. And all of this depends on what we're about to explain right now. Know the following. We have already explained that everything that exists on a general level and on a specific level is all Hashem manifesting His will. So it comes out that everything in existence and all of the orders of things, whether we're talking about the source powers up in the heavens, Bein Banivroim Haruchanim, or we're talking about spiritual entities like angels, Bein Bagashmiim, or anything in the physical world, Einam Miskaimim El B'Mashu Hu Yisbarach Shemai Nimtza Lehem Litlois Bai. They only exist in so much that Hashem is providing them with the energy of existence. V'hinei, Hu nimtza'u misgale al kol nimtza'ov. And therefore Hashem is manifesting in all of these things. Umashpia bam kafi masharoi lahem lekiyum inyanam. And is influencing his energy into all of these things in order to establish them and give them their existence. V'nimtzu hashpos urabos v'shainos kafi ribu hamakablim v'shinom. And therefore, the influence itself that Hashem is exerting is going to be different for everything that is accepting it on its different level. Meaning, if Hashem creates a certain kind of angel, that energy is going to look different than the way a frog shows up in this world. Right? And that should be obvious. Uvehashpa'os hahem talu metzius kol hametzius l'machlekaisam v'chol inyanehem. And the difference in these energies that are being exerted is what defines how things are different when they come into creation. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure.
What he's getting at is we take for granted that there are different things that exist and that they have some sort of inherent existence, but it's not true. Meaning the fact that a watch exists and a frog exists and the concept of the number 3 exists. All of these things only exist because if you trace it back to their ultimate source of existence, it's an influence of Hashem's energy. And therefore, the difference in anything in existence can be traced back to a difference in the type of energy that's being exerted by Hashem.
A different input from Hashem.
Exactly. That's all this is. Ukashimoshku hashpa'os hahem. And when those, like you said, different inputs from Hashem are drawn forth, Yevoldu kol hatolodus hanolodus mehem. That is what generates everything that shows up. B'chol ha'ishtarshelus hanimtzois, and the entire chain of existence that comes into being. Kifi mashasider, according to what Hashem has arranged. V'yikablu hamalachim me'oyer yisbarach shemai hamiskale aleihem. And the angels, the malachim, receive this light, this influence from Hashem, as it's being revealed to them. Mashi yikablu v'yashpiyim helyonim l'tachtainim umehem v'hatachtainim l'tachtainim ad soif hashtalshelus kuloi. So this energy, this input that is very specific, gets handed down through this chain from one angel to the next, being passed down through all of these levels until it shows up at the bottom of the chain. Va'amnam. Now, Ratza Hashem Yisbarach Shemai liyos nikra b'shem. Now, Hashem wanted to be called by name, which is interesting because Hashem really shouldn't have a name. People speak about gender. Well, how could there be a gender for God? We're not going to get into that now. But the truth is, how could there even be a name for God?
Right.
A name defines the essence of something. At least in the ancient Hebrew it does.
How can you have a definition of something without any boundaries?
Precisely. You can't. Nevertheless, Hashem wanted to be related to. Hashem the point of our entire existence is for us to be able to relate to Hashem and recognize Hashem and bring the world back to Him in unity. And therefore, we have to be able to recognize some sort of concept of Hashem, even though it might not be ever exactly true, because we cannot conceive of the infinite, but there needs to be some method of us being able to relate to Hashem. And therefore, He has created names for Himself for us to be able to relate to. V'hinei yiched lichavoidoi Hashem hamayuchad. Now, He has specified one name in particular that's very special, and that is the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. V'amar alav zeh shemi la'olam. And He said in the Torah, this is my name forever. And it's the highest, most lofty name that a man could conceive of in terms of the way we could relate to Hashem. V'hu Hashem shenikra bo al shem hakavod ba'atzmai, kefi masha rotza likare b'shem. And this is the name of glory, the holiest name. But again, this is not a definition of Hashem, of course, This is just the way he wanted us to relate to him. Ve'amnam, furthermore, kefi kol prate hashpa oisav, ratza v'nikra b'shem shainim. All of this is where it gets relevant. All of these inputs that we've been talking about, anything that exists in this world, any function that's being performed, and any action that's happening, and anything that comes into existence, it's all a result of some input from Hashem, some very specific type of energy that's being condensed into this world. Hashem also wanted all of these inputs to be called by names as well.
I'm starting to see where this is coming together.
V'hine, gazar v'chokak shebehazkir beruav es shemo, yemashich lehem mimenu ha'ar v'hashba. Hashem built into the world a very special power that in the mentioning of a name, of his name, it will draw forth that energy, that inspiration of light, that influence that is associated with that name. The Torah says in Shemos, in the book of Exodus, in any place that you mention my name, I will come and bless you.
So this must be at least part of why we're so careful with the use of the names of Hashem.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. But I just want to look at that verse one more time. He says, in any place that you mention my name, I will come and bless you. And it could be understood, and I think it is understood on the simplest level. If you just read the Torah, it sounds like if you call out to Hashem, he'll respond to you, he'll come and bless you. But what the Ramchal is telling us here is that there's a deep secret that's embedded in that verse. What he's saying is, if you mention my name, I will come and bless you consequently. It is the mentioning of the name which draws forth that energy. It's not just the fact that you're calling out to Hashem. It's the fact that you verbally pronounce the name that draws forth that divine energy to open up blessing into the world. V'ulam, kefi Hashem sheyazkiruhu v'yikruuhu bo, kach tiyeh hashba hanimsheches al yedei hazkarahi. Now, of course, according to the name that is mentioned, that will be whatever energy and input is associated with that name will be drawn forth. Perush, ki hashba shetimashech tiyeh mimin oisa hashba sha'asayda nisyasid lo yizbarach shemay Hashemahu. Meaning, what we've just said, that whatever divine energy or function which is going to be performed, whatever name is associated with that in its ultimate foundation is what is going to occur at the mentioning of that name. Va'amnam v'himashich ha'ashba tivalid behechreach ha'toylada amuchekas lo. So at the mentioning of that name, as a direct result of that, consequently, that result will occur. V'yispashit ha'inin b'chol ha'ishtalshelus min ha'rosh v'ad soif k'moshe kasavnu. And that energy will spread throughout the entire chain from the very top until the end, like we've written earlier. V'hine higbilo ha'chochma elyono es ha'inin begvulos yiduim u'v'tanoim yuchadim. Now, Hashem defined this power, this ability to invoke these names and create change in the physical world. These are defined by very specific rules and with very specific conditions. Kishetiyeh haskara nishlemas b'hem, timashech hashpa ahiva tivolet hatolada v'lo zulazeh. And it's only under those conditions and following those rules will this have any sort of effect whatsoever.
If I'm ever quiet sometimes, it's because I'm waiting for the next sentence so often now. Because, what we learned just kind of, it begs the question, why wouldn't I invoke Hashem's various names in all these different things I'm doing? And of course, Ramchal foresaw that question and answered it right there. It just wouldn't work.
Right. Well, that's half the answer. Half the answer is it wouldn't work because you don't know how to do it right. But the other half is even if you would know how to do it right, you still shouldn't. And the answer to why would you not do that, he'll answer later on in this episode. V'hine, bichlal ha'ashpos shegazar she'yamashchu mimenu yisbarach shemai. Now, included in these energies that you could invoke, Sida she'yamashchu ha'ashpos shebehagiyam lami she'yakablem yivutlu bekoicham gevulos migvulos hateva k'mo shebe'arnu. Now, embedded in these invocations, together with that energy that's being drawn forth, it also comes together with an added ability to remove those barriers of physicality and nullify the definitions of the physical world, like we were mentioning earlier. So this is the mechanics of how it works. A person invokes a certain name. Now, and it's not just magic. What that name does is it literally calls a function. You are calling a function. You are.
I don't know if you want to be using all these coding terms.
If you know, you know. That through the pronunciation of that word, which is itself. Now, here's where it's not exactly like calling a function in programming. It's not a code that is meant to then generate something. It is the function. Right? Because this is what we were talking about. The name of something is the essence of what it is. And all of these energies that exist in the world have names. And what that really means is that the name is the essence of that function. So when someone pronounces that name, they are doing the function. Now, they don't have the power to do it directly, but what they are doing is drawing forth that function itself from the higher realms.
Is this connected? This is a little bit of a tangent, but is this connected to the beginning of Bereshit, where Adam Harishon names all the animals, and I ostensibly probably names all the things in existence?
Well, he names the animals. It's connected, at least in the sense that we see that the concept of a name is the definition of the essence of the thing, and that he saw the animals and understood their true essence. And he didn't arbitrarily name them, but he understood what their names inherently were and spoke them.
I see.
So this is something different. Here a person is invoking some function of Hashem's energy by calling out its name. And that also, what he's saying now, has the ability to, in addition to that energy itself, it has the ability to override the normal laws of nature. V'yiskasher ha'ishahu im hanimtzaim haruchanim, and to tie that person to spiritual things. Right? This opens up the channels of his spirituality. It detaches himself a little bit from his body. V'tagia lo yediah ha'askala mehaskala hanoshios, and it gives him access to this divine knowledge that would have been otherwise inaccessible. And not just that, he has access to other things. He doesn't elaborate. V'hu inyan madregos haruach hakodesh v'hanevua commotion. V'hu inyan madregos haruach hakodesh v'hanevua commotion nichtov lefnim b'siyata d'shmaya. And this is also what Ruach HaKodesh, or divine inspiration, as it's sometimes translated, or Nevuah, which is prophecy, it's all related to this as well, but those are for a later chapter. V'hine gazar shehamshachas hashbos ha'ela. Now he decreed that the drawing forth of these energies, gam kein tiyeh al yedei ha'imtzai shezacharnu, these energies that break down these barriers between physicality and spirituality, it's also done with the same means. Dehainu shemoisav yisbarach shemai, meaning calling out the names of Hashem, HaMesyach Simla, that are related to that energy. Al shem hashbos ela behi kovin bahem b'machshavas alev, these names that a person could even just think internally, or that he verbally pronounces it with his mouth, or he's connecting them together with other words, with all of the conditions that are required for combining names together, like we'll explain further in the book later on. So again, he's not giving a guide to how to do this. If it sounds complicated, it's because it is. And he's not giving instructions for how to do it, but again, we're just understanding the general concept. Number 6. V'hinei hadavar yadua. Now, along those same lines, he says it should be known. She'afal pi sheklal ze ha'inyan echad hu. even though the general principle of everything we've been discussing is this one idea, Dahainu hayetzia migvulei hateva, the concept of breaking the laws of nature. Hine protei ha'inyan rabim. There are very numerous details to this. Kafi sidre metzius hanimtzais v'hadergosehem, all according to the structure of reality and all of the different levels involved. Ki kafi masha teva hanimtzais v'sidr noisen kakiye protei hashpois hamitzdarchim lahashlamas hadavar b'chol b'chinaisav. Because just like within nature, within reality, and all the levels of existence, it is very complicated, and there are all these different levels, and therefore, corresponding to that, there are just as many different kinds of energies that are required to bringing these to fruition. So therefore, if a person wants to invoke one of these energies, it just makes everything that much more complicated. All of the conditions that are required for doing it properly become more and more complex. How will a person be able to identify that frog among everything in all of existence? It can't be as simple as there's one name for this frog and you just pronounce it. Now, and even if a person could identify one of them, there are varying degrees of how far you could take it, of how far you can break those laws of nature, just like anything else that has details upon details. You could have one person that exits the laws of nature to X degree, and someone else who is able to accomplish that same thing but a little bit further. And we'll speak about this also later on.
This is fascinating because there are definitely, I'm an avid reader, and there are definitely a ton of, fantasy series and things. I mean, things that I read a lot before, many years ago. I just have vague recollections of all sorts of magical systems being based on knowing the true names of a thing. There's something to it that I think speaks to everyone.
There is something to it. I think it's something that is deeply embedded within human knowledge. This was known by Adam, right, and known by early cultures as well. Even the phrase abracadabra is Aramaic, which means I will create as I speak. Abra, I will create. Kidabra, as speech.
Wow.
So this is nothing new. Yes, and this concept is deeply embedded in many world cultures. Now, because this chapter is very long and deep, we're going to cut it here. We'll split the episode, and next time we'll come back with the continuation of this chapter.
All right. Thank you, Rabbi.